right, Jonathan, we're here today to talk about the latest Lens Distortions album, Act Two. Tell me about this album.
So, Act Two is a sequel to our album, The Humble Creative. And when we started the project, we kind of asked ourselves a very simple question, which is why are the sequels in trilogies so often the fan favorite? The second film of a trilogy. So, The Empire Strikes Back, The Two Towers, Spider-Man 2, The Dark Knight, all of them are the fan favorite. And I
Hmm.
think the reason is because those films, they kind of have the freedom to go deeper into the world, deeper into the characters, the themes. So we said, well, why don't we give ourselves that same freedom and dive deeper into the world of the humble creative?
What's always intrigued me about The Humble Creative as an album is that it's sort of meta in a way. Like our customers, I think, read themselves into the story and saw themselves in sort of the audible narrative that the album told and the description and just the feeling of it. It's this idea of you're chasing greatness and you're doing these ambitious ideas to try to achieve something really meaningful, but there's a humility involved in it because ideas are delicate and there's no guarantee that you were able to even sort of translate this idea that's in your head into the film or onto paper or whatever the medium might be. And
Yep.
so that's some of the feedback that I heard from folks was that it especially some of our uh, creators who are kind of influencers as well and would turn the camera on themselves. It's almost this autobiographical story about journeys that they're on. But also, some of our biggest brands that we work with have loved the Humble Creative. Some of my iconic brands have used tracks from this. And so, yeah, it just makes sense to keep building out that world and to find more tracks kind of within that tone and texture of that original album. So I'd love to hear some of it. One of the fun things about these sessions is that I often haven't heard anything from the album. So this is genuinely, my first listen as well. So I'd love for you to demo some of these tracks.
Absolutely. Yeah, Act Two has all the same color and tone, instrumentation as the Humble Creative. It's all written in the same key. So all the tracks between Act Two and the Humble Creative are interchangeable. You could use them all in the same project. We're
That's
just kind
great.
of expanding the storyline a little bit. And we'll talk more about the storyline in a moment. But first, let's listen to the first track, which is called Pure Progress.
Nice. What I love about that, I mean, I hear that and I just think this track is bursting with a feeling of potential.
Mm-hmm.
And what's cool is that, in so much music, that's the feeling that, especially in the commercial world, people are looking for. Like, there can be not even an ounce of detection of, something feeling ominous or scary or overly weighty or something. And so, of course, you have cliche corporate music that's really, echoey guitars and upbeat piano and whatever. And so often that's what clients are asking, a filmmaker for, because that's all they know. And I love that this, to me, can scratch that itch and give that feeling and that tone that they're going for, positivity, without ever, crossing the line into cliche or cheesy. So I love a track like this when we can thread that needle.
So let me give you some quick backstory on the name Act Two. A long time ago, I read a book called Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. And it's a really famous book about screenwriting and the 3-act film structure. It's a really, really fun book. Highly recommend it. And one of the ideas that has stuck with me ever since I read that book is this idea called the fun and games section of any film. It's in the 2nd act. This is the part of the movie where the main character rolls up their sleeves and starts pursuing their goals. So, for example, in Ocean's 11, that's the part of the film where George Clooney is assembling all of his team of weird and random people. In Inception, that's the part of the movie where Leonardo DiCaprio is building out his master plan. In The Martian, it's the part of the movie where Matt Damon is stuck on Mars and he's like duct taping things together and trying to invent all these solutions to his problems. Those are the kind of stories and themes we wanted to build into this album. Finding traction, navigating fun problems, building momentum, all of those themes kind of found their way into the music. So I have a great example we could listen to right now that kind of illustrates that.
Let's do it.
So you can tell in that track, you're definitely hearing the characters putting things together, working on solving problems. It's the fun and games part of the story.
For sure. Yeah, it's like a little bit of energy and a little bit of intrigue is kind of the overarching tone.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. What else is in here?
So, it wouldn't be a sequel to The Humble Creative if we didn't have a track that really leaned into some of the meaning that's underneath great design. At Lens Distortions, we absolutely love design, and The Humble Creative was a little bit of a love letter to design from us. So
Hmm.
we have another track here called Finding the Meaning that really kind of taps into that.
I like that ending where it kind of tapers off with that repetitive cycling of the melody there. I got to be honest on this one. I was kind of daydreaming as I was listening, and I was not paying attention to the waveform. And the big, impactful breakthrough caught me by surprise. Like the audio was kind of jarring, and I thought, oh well, they found the meaning right there. That's the breakthrough. So it's cool. I mean, I feel like mission achieved there as far as creating that feeling in the track.
Yeah, one of the things I love about Act Two is that we have the down to earth, nitty gritty music for people doing stuff, right? That's really kind of everyday, day in the life kind of stuff. But we also have these larger than life tracks that really are aspirational and not necessarily overly dramatic, but they definitely extend the meaning that you feel, from the stuff that the people are working on. I think that's the idea of meaning is something that's always been really important to us. I know you and I talk about this all the time. I feel
Mhm.
like I feel like our modern world is facing a bit of a crisis of meaning. You
Mhm.
know, everything has become so cheap and disposable, especially content,
Mhm.
you know?
Definitely.
And to find, if I'm talking to a filmmaker, I'm always telling them to slow down, stop chasing the algorithms, lean into the source material of what you're working on, and give yourself permission to work really hard on something that you'll be proud of 10 years from now. Those are the
Yeah,
kind of projects that Lens Distortions is really optimized for, and the type of customers that we're really focused on helping.
absolutely. Yeah. Made me think about this C.S. Lewis quote that I've always loved. That's like, don't focus on being original, just focus on telling the truth. And
Mm,
nine times out of ten, by telling the truth, you'll say it in an original way. And it's like finding the meaning, finding the substance, finding the truth, and
hmm.
chasing that relentlessly rather than the unknown of some ephemeral success or, like you said, algorithm or approval of people based on the trends or whatever. And that meaning is timeless, right? The truth is timeless. These things are good. And if you chase those, you're going to end up with your own interpretation of those and your own way of articulating those. So,
Yeah. And, earlier you mentioned how hard it is to avoid cliche stuff. Like that's the
mm,
first thing you have to do to avoid cliche is pull on the thread and dig really deep and and find those nuggets that no one else can see.
that's right. But one of the ways we do that as, a brand that produces music is trying not to really pay attention to what's going on in the music world, right? We're not thinking,
Hmm.
oh, here's what other composers are doing or something, and like, how do we do that? We're trying to find inspiration from other sources, from timeless sources, from big ideas, from history or other disciplines like design, right? Where design is such a central part of what we do. And what's cool about that is, you try to focus on what is true in the design world, or what is true from filmmaking, or what is true from this philosopher, or whatever it might be. And then you think about, how do I embody that in music? And you end up with then different music than, oh, well, what this pop artist is doing, or this really
Yep.
trendy, artist is doing. How do I recreate that? It's not derivative; it's inspired and original. And that's kind of always the goal for us: is we want to be inspired by the world out there, and then produce an original sort of thing out of that. So,
Absolutely. So that is a perfect segue into the next track that I want to show off today, which is called Craft and Beauty, which is something that, we care very deeply about. And so we tried writing a song that encapsulates some of that idea.
this track. It's the type of track that I really personally enjoy because it evokes just so much feeling and puts me in this contemplative mood. And this is exactly the type of track that I like to listen to. I call it 24p walking. And I just think of it as like, man, you put the right music in your headphones and walk down the street with the right pace. And it's almost like the world becomes cinematic. This is the type of track that kind of takes me there. And so, you know, I think it can achieve the exact same thing on the timeline in a piece of storytelling, right? So consider me biased towards this this particular one, but really beautiful.
Love it. 24p walking, TM.
Exactly. Exactly. One time I was walking through my neighborhood, and listening to one of our tracks, and just off in my own little thought world, and someone drove by and they yelled, "That's not walking, that's sauntering." And and at first I was scared because I was, why is someone yelling at me? And then I was offended because I thought, I think those words were meant to wound. And then I was deeply satisfied because I thought, man, I'm truly living right now in this moment. So, or maybe I just look like a crazy person, but I definitely recommend people give the old 24p walk a try. So,
Cool.
well, great. Any other
Anything
tracks
else?
for us?
I think that's all we're going to preview today. Any other things we want to discuss?
No, I think this one it's really interesting just because of it's a simple one, and we often talk about so much music is disqualified from being useful to filmmakers because it just goes a little too far. So much of the music that you find on stock platforms, etc., it's like, the composer just didn't have a buddy to tell him like, hey, dial that back. Hey, hey, you didn't need to do that. And so I think this album shows a lot of restraint, but just enough texture, to keep it interesting, and just enough minimalism to keep it really useful for a wide variety of projects. And I'm excited to see what people do with it, and to hear some of the fans of the original album, The Humble Creative, come out of the woodwork and share their thoughts on it.